Sorry about that, folks. I was on mute. Hello and welcome to another edition of the WorkplaceTech Spotlight. My name is Guillermo Corea, Managing Director of SHRM Labs, SHRM's Workplace Innovation Lab. I'm your host for this series where we shine a spotlight on some of the most interesting future of work topics, innovators, and disruptive technologies. Before we get started today, some housekeeping and general announcements. For any startups that are listening today, two major deadlines are approaching. So the 2023 Workplace Tech Accelerator application period is closing this Monday, January 16th, and the application deadline for the Better Workplaces Challenge Cup, the leading workplace tech pitch competition, will close this Sunday, January 15th. This year, we're also expanding the competition globally, as well as adding a new track for SHRM members to showcase how the people who know the workplace the best, HR, are innovating. The application period for individual SHRM members is now open and will close on February 19th. Please note that the winner of this competition will receive a trip to the SHRM Annual Conference and Exposition in Las Vegas from June 11th through the 14th. And as many of you know, this is the largest HR conference in the world. Lastly, for those of you watching on LinkedIn or other social media platforms, please share this live stream and tag SHRM. You can use the hashtags SHRM Labs as well as Workplace Tech. So today, we're going to continue the discussion from last week's Workplace Tech Spotlight segment, which focused once again on the people who know the workplace the best, HR. As mentioned last week, SHRM's purpose is to elevate the HR profession, and our mission is to empower people in workplaces by advancing HR practices and maximizing human potential. We strongly, and I can't emphasize that enough, we strongly believe that HR is best positioned to lead workplace innovation and organizational development. Change in the workplace and in your own work doesn't come easy. It takes vision, connections, commitment, and access to the right resources. To that end, we're going to be launching various initiatives in 2023 to support HR professionals that are interested in becoming more tech savvy. And you will hear about one of those towards the end of today's show. So today we have two special guests that are no strangers to workplace innovation, HR technology, and digital transformation. Before I welcome them to the stage, I'm pleased to announce that they will be judges in the Better Workplaces Challenge Cup finals at the SHRM Annual Conference this year. And I couldn't think of two better people to join us in selecting this year's winner. So please help me in welcoming to the stage Tim Sackett, President at HRU Technical Resources, and William Tincup, President at Recruiting Daily. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited about this great conversation that we're going to have. Welcome to the stage. And before we begin, how about if you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself? I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys are well known with the SHRM audience, but Tim, you want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. I write and blog in the HR tech space for a long time at my blog, the Tim Sackett Project. Also run a recruiting shop out of Michigan. Have also spent half my career on like the corporate HR side of things. So bring a wealth of background and knowledge from there. And I'll let my good friend William Tincup, take it from there.
Tim's not telling you that he's a Capricorn, but that's important to note. We've both been in this space for a long time, spoken at a lot of SHRM chapter and state and SHRM annual. And we both love HR technology. And so this is just going to be wonderful. I can't tell you how excited I am about SHRM really dipping their big toe into tech in 2023. It's so important. And so I'm just really happy to be supportive of the practitioners and anybody else. So thank you for having us here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of people have said it's about time. So I think you both would agree with me, right? So here we are, and we're going to do it, So it's 2023, right? And as the year gets started, we're looking at, what we can expect across the HR space, especially, for what we're talking about here, HR technology. But, before we get into that, how about if we do just a quick rewind, right? What were some of the trends that you saw in 2022 that you think are important to note here, for the audience that's watching us this morning? William, Tim, either one of you?
Go ahead, William.
Sure. I think the thing that I saw coming out of COVID, and especially kind of last year in particular, is we already knew that there was a vast array of solutions. Like that's not new. We've probably been talking about that for years. And so you can't help but think that practitioners are overwhelmed. So as Tim would tell you, you go in on Monday and it's a firestorm and you're just putting out fires. And oh, by the way, there's 300 engagement tools that launch that week across the world. And so I think what I found in talking to practitioners, I podcast a lot, so I talk to practitioners on the podcast. But one of the things I found, it kept kind of recurring over and over, is just being overwhelmed with the sheer volume of applications at their disposal, which is a good thing, right? Like when you go into a grocery store, it's nice to have choice done. But we're to a point where how do they make great choices? And so I felt, especially last year, getting into November and December, that people were just overwhelmed with what should I do? Like, where should I start if I'm redoing my technology stack, which is a fancy way of saying what technology you've purchased in recruiting and HR. What should I start with? Where do I start? Where do I start, and how do I get started? And I think that's not a new problem, but I think COVID shocked everyone into like whatever we have, let's use, et cetera. And but towards the end of the year, I just got people being overwhelmed.
Yeah, and I would say that they're overwhelmed also with the amount of data that they're getting from all these systems. Like, how do you track all that stuff, right? And how do you pull out the stuff that's really going to make you, a few segments back, we talked about how one of the things that CHROs are being expected to do now is to basically pull out their crystal ball and look at all this data and say, okay, this is where we need to be heading, right? So, Tim, anything that you want to add as far as
Yeah, I mean, obviously the talent thing became, just such an issue over the last few years. Everybody tried to, want to get it. The technology space obviously knew a lot of people were going to be buyers if they could find a way to help them. On top of that, there was a lot of DE&I tech that was released that I think William and I would probably both agree that most of that is what we would call in the tech space vapor, which is it's kind of not really like doing anything around DE&I, but they were using it to market. So that because organizations truly said, hey, we want to make an impact here. And they're like, oh, well, we have your thing. And then after they paid the money and got the thing, it was like, oh, wait a minute, it didn't really do anything. Because like any great technology is only as good as what your processes and your culture and everything else is. Like you still have to do the hard groundwork, the technology that allows you to do it much faster. And I think the diversity tech space has really, for the most part, there's some good solutions out there, but for the most part, sold a bunch of stuff that was kind of snake oil, for lack of a better kind of term, and didn't really help organizations the way they were hoping it would help. And so, but around, like, again, I echo what William said, the vast amount of solutions. When we go to the SHRM annual this year, there'll be hundreds of technology solutions on the floor. That's a tiny fraction of the tens of thousands of solutions that are out there available to them. And all of us as practitioners are getting emails and phone calls and all this stuff jammed down our throat on a daily basis. And it is overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you guys think about the L&D solutions? Like, right?
I think L&D, it used to be in a compartment, which was kind of easier for practitioners, especially L&D and the training folks. It was in this spot where, okay, we need to train our employees, and most of it started as compliance. So we need to train our employees on our sexual harassment policy and this, that, and the other. And there was a way of the documentation. So I think that the learning space kind of has its roots in compliance, which is great. But what I think I've seen over the last couple of years, which is really fascinating, is learning's gotten pushed into every other aspect of HR.
Yeah.
So like now when you're recruiting and when you're onboarding and when you're doing all these other, you're also doing L&D. You're building learning paths together at a much, much earlier stage than we did a few years ago. A few years ago, you'd be an employee for a year or two and then go, hey, and people would put you on a path. Now they're putting you on a path when they're recruiting you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what they're trying to do, this end to end, right? Where you go, oh, based on the interview, based on your assessments, based on all this stuff when we hired you, now here's the skills that you need to do. And we're going to hear in 2023 and beyond, skills. Everyone's jamming skills down our throat. I think it's going to take a little bit longer because it's really difficult. Every single organization is building their own taxonomy. I mean, every organization is doing their own thing. Technology, I think, will help build a framework, but what I see, I think that the most successful organizations developing or using skills is really around internal mobility right now. I think what we see is employees love that. They want to go, hey, we said we went through all this pain and effort and attraction to get you to come work for us. And now we want you to kind of be able to move within the organization. That's not a traditional way of thinking. It was like William said, hey, we hired you. You're now going to spend 3 to 5 years in this job. And then if your boss actually has any kind of heart at all, they'll let you maybe apply to another job in the organization. Otherwise, they're going to trap you in this job for the rest of your life. And so what we found was like internal mobility solutions, employees love. And organizations that have the culture to allow those employees to move around are really seeing the benefit of longer tenures and retention, which I think is pretty important.
Yeah, there's a popular phrase kind of out of urban culture. It's called "caught up." And one of the things is, you study HR tech for years, what you see is that vendors flock to something because they think it's the thing that will help them get in the door with practitioners. As practitioners, it's hard to get in the door because they're so busy. Their time is so consumed. And so we saw it with AI a couple of years ago. Even platforms that had no AI at all, no NLP, no machine learning, nothing, but they market themselves as AI. As Tim's already kind of talked about DEI, same thing. We get caught up, the vendors get caught up, and it creates this kind of fury. And that comes across to practitioners. You go to a conference or you watch a webinar, just looking at your inbox, there's all of these different types of messages, and you feel like I'm missing. There's a bit of FOMO, but I'm missing because I'm getting caught up and I need to do this thing. What I typically tell practitioners is like, hit pause and ask yourself, do you really actually need to do that?
And by the way, so along those lines, and you know, I'll put a plug in for SHRM Labs, right?
Yeah.
And you guys are well aware of this. You know, that's one of the reasons why we created SHRM Labs, right? Because we felt that there needs to be a closer collaboration between, you know, the HR practitioners and the innovators out there to ensure that, you know, whatever it is that they're creating that really fits the needs of HR, you know, because typically what we've seen is that, you know, here's HR, here's the innovators, right? There's that bridge, you know, that needs to be built between them. The innovators, they see a problem, they jump on the problem, they think they found a solution, then they bring it over to HR, and HR basically says, no, that's not for me. So, you know, so let's go into 2023. You know, what are some of these trends going to continue in 2023? What do you think is one big trend that we're likely to see this year?
I think because William and I talk to like hundreds and hundreds of vendors every year. So I know we already know from the marketing side what everyone's going to get like smashed over their head with. Employee experience is going to be a big one, which is just a new marketing term for talking about performance management, engagement, kind of all combined, right? Holistically, how do we do this? I still think the miss will be, because the other thing that William and I get to talk to you is like the C-suite. When we talk to them, they're like, the performance management thing has been missed, right? They're just like, look, I don't care about the review thing and this and that. I know employees want feedback and that equals high engagement and blah, blah, blah. They want like performance, like they want productivity. They want performance intelligence. Like, how do you take the data? I mean, we saw this with Salesforce, I think this week or end of last week, where they said, hey, everyone's coming back to the office, right? We see this from a lot of big brands every week now. And I mean, because the CEO goes, I just don't think remote employees are performing. But they don't know if they're not performing. They just don't think they're performing. And so how do we use technology to go, oh no, we know for sure through data that somebody actually is performing as well or better remotely, or they're not, and let's bring them back and help them, retrain them, give them the tools they need internally, whatever that might be. But it's always going to be wrapped around this employee experience kind of umbrella from a marketing standpoint. William, what's one of yours?
Yeah, we saw last year at a number of conferences and webinars and things like that, the words talent experience And I always kind of felt like that was churched up employee experience and a little bit of succession planning. And sometimes it's just a rebranding. It's the same stuff. It's just kind of a rebranding of those things. I think that I echo everything Tim said. The only thing I'd add is as Guillermo, as you said at the beginning, we're expecting all of our HR professionals to be data scientists.
Yeah.
Not just technologists, but data scientists. And so not only do you have to have great analytical ability, you've got to have that data. Then you've got to be able to tell a story about what the data is actually telling us. And none of that is easy for any vertical, for marketing and sales and operations. It's not easy for anybody. But we're behind the eight ball in HR and TA in the sense of how do you make sense of what data that you get. And I think one of the things that I coach HR practitioners about is data is never perfect. So if you're looking for perfect data, stop. You're just going to have to make decisions on the best data that you have at that moment. And that's in all these different solutions. Is most of them, if not all, have some form of analytics, which is great, but that doesn't tell you what you should be looking at and why and how to fix it. Like essentially it's a dashboard. It's a really nice way. Analytics is a really nice way of saying we'll have a dashboard. Well, great. A dashboard's only as good as your ability to read said dashboard and then make sense of it and then tell a story. Yeah. So I think anything we can do to lift the profession and help them along their way, and also what vendors can do. What vendors have a hand in this, they can actually help practitioners understand the data and then also kind of, okay, here's what we see in the data, here's what you should know about it, and here are a couple solutions.
William, you said something really important around our data not being perfect, because I think in HR for so long, when I was in my HR career, I met with so many HR leaders that were afraid to go to the boardroom because they're like, I'm not 100% confident in our data. But you know who wasn't afraid? Finance, sales, marketing, operations. They all came with messy data and they were fine with it, right? Because they were confident in the story. And that's really the question, or the key is like, how do we get our executives to feel confident that, hey, the data might not be exactly perfect, but trending wise, we know where it's going. We know how that's going to be. And by the way, I'm prescriptive of what we're going to do about it. And then that's the trust factor, right? I will say, like, anybody that's listening right now or listens after this is like, if you want to be an HR director, a VP, a CHRO in your career, the two competencies that you have to like just nail right now today in 2023 is technology and data. Like, focus there. Like, don't think about any traditional HR competencies. Think about data and technology, and you will rise up in your organization or another organization. Right now, when I talk with a CHRO or talk to a C-suite and they're looking for an HR leader or a talent leader, those are really the two things they're looking for. They don't need someone that goes, oh, I want someone that ran talent acquisition for 20 years at a big brand. They're like, I need someone that's great at technology and great at data, and all the rest of it they'll figure out.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, and I loved what you just said, because it's right in line with what I was saying at the beginning, right? About, it's time for HR to step right up. As a matter of fact, last week, we had the pleasure of having Alex Alonso, our chief knowledge officer. And, one of the things that he mentioned was like, hey, in the future, I foresee, having an employee experience engineer that's part of HR, right? Why not? So very quickly, before we make our next major announcement here, let's get our crystal balls out. What happens after 2023? Where do you see HR professionals? How is it that you kind of alluded to it a little bit, Tim, but how is it that work is going to be changing? Adoption of technology.
I'm really excited and geeking out about like the GDP stuff, the chat GDP stuff, because I got to tell you, if you can foresee how potentially that might change. And I wrote an article that's going to be out on, coming out on SHRM here pretty soon. But I mean, literally think about just simple stuff. Like, think about if you're a payroll person in HR and you have your payroll system and all of a sudden something changes and you're like, oh, I need to change that field. Think about the 6 months and the hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars it takes to change that, versus you going to the AI and going, hey, I need to change this field. And immediately it happens within seconds. And then also that they don't go, but wait a minute, something just broke downstream, right? Because it's technology.
Mhm.
And then you go, oh, wait a minute, we need to fix this as well. And then boom, 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 and it fixes. So we're moving from a creator, right? In HR right now, we create policy, we create programs, we create all this, to more of a narrator of the future or the world we want to see. We're going to narrate to AI and say, hey, here's what we go. I foresee literally right now, ChatGPT could write your policies for you, write your job descriptions for you, and you just have to narrate what you want.
Yeah.
And so we no longer have to create, we have to narrate. And so I don't know if it's all going to happen in 2023. I know tech companies are moving very quickly to try to integrate some of this stuff. For sure in 24, 25, AI and the ability for us to narrate the world we want to see is going to change almost everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
William, what are your thoughts?
100% concur with Tim. The thing that I would say is with millennials and Gen Z and the generation after that is the work needs to be centered around them versus the business, which is kind of sounds crazy to say, but one of the things that we learned through COVID, but really it was happening before that, is millennials want to work the way that they want to work. And Gen Z has shown us the ability that they will not work unless it's the work in the way that they want to work, which first of all, it's liberating. I think it's great. I wish I was 20 again for a number of reasons. But the thing is we as talent leaders, we have to actually look at that and reconstruct all of our work and say, okay, is this centered around the business or is this centered around talent? Because we have these phrases that we talk about. This is a candidate-driven market. This is an employee-driven market. Throw all that out the window. And this is a talent-driven market. Whatever we can do to wrap ourselves around talent and make their life and experience better, then we have the ability to recruit and keep that talent. And if we don't do that, we do it at our peril, because these two generations will just leave. They will literally not take the job, or they'll leave the job because they feel like the work, again, is important, got it, but it's not the way that they want it constructed. So I think one of the things, as Tim talked about on the technology side, I think it's also our mindsets changing around, we need to reconstruct the way work's done and using technology to enable, because, everyone has a smartphone. Everyone's got consumerized, applications on their phone. Uber or Lyft, right? Rideshare. Right. Everyone's accustomed to that type of transparency and that type of communication layer. Okay, well, what are we doing in onboarding? What are we doing in performance? Like all of that stuff that happens on our phone.
How does somebody show up for a job in 2023 today? Today, somebody showed up for their first day on their job and they literally had no idea except where to show up. They didn't know what their job was going to be. They didn't know where they didn't know if they were going to have to pack a lunch or not. Like, we fail so often on simple communication stuff that I think, again, all these technologies will help us kind of, it's the pre-boarding side of onboarding, right? The day that they said, yes, I want to come work for you, is the day you should have a hook into them communication wise nonstop through their mobile device.
Yeah. And actually, there's a great company that's part of our portfolio called Mainstay that actually addresses all of that. And they've been doing some wonderful things there. So, before we conclude our discussion, as I was mentioning at the beginning, we do have a special announcement that we want to make here. So let's go ahead and roll the tape.
Tim.
So there it is. We're bringing SHRM Tech from India and bringing it to the U.S. for the first time ever. So SHRM Tech NorCal is an event that we're going to be holding at the Grand Hyatt in San Francisco, March 7th through the 8th. Tim and William, you both are going to be there attending and participating. Any thoughts around that?
No, I think it's long overdue. I think, we get a piece of this right at SHRM Town. We get a piece of this at SHRM Annual. And, I think Johnny a couple of years ago was the one that came out and kind of said, like, put the flag in the sand. And it was like, hey, it's time. People, when they think of HR tech, they should think about SHRM. And I think this is the next logical step. I'm really excited for it.
Guillermo, I can tell you from our discussions in 22 about this, it was one of the hardest things I've had to do to not tell people. Because when we talk
now in the open, so there you go.
Yeah, and I'm like, I got this thing that I really want to tell these people, but I can't. So now that it's out, I can actually tell people. But I think, first of all, coming to the show, to having the show, it's going to get bigger and bigger and more diverse and more technologies, more practitioners. It's just going to be the place to be. For all of TA and HR to come together and learn about technology, which is fantastic. I've got a couple of hacks. You want some hacks?
And by the way, I just want to make it, I want to put this message out there to the audience. This event is an HR tech event that's focused on the HR practitioner. It's about, getting HR practitioners to that next level. This is not going to be about coming in and watching a whole bunch of product demos and things like that. It's about the HR practitioner, because as we've, talked about in this conversation, right? HR really needs to step up their game, and we're going to help them do that.
Yeah, but and that's one thing I think that's missed there's other HR tech conferences worldwide right now, right? But most of those, you show up and it's like, oh, we get to see some big HCM play, talk to some big brand about how they implemented this big whatever. And you're like, that's fine. But like, what I find is that most of the HR practitioners, leaders, still have these like really in the weeds, like issues and questions. And they're just like, wait a minute, well, why should I do this versus this? And it's not, they don't want to see they don't want to have the marketing talk, right? They want to have real talk with people who are really doing it. And I think that's the big win here.
Yeah, it's interesting because it'll proliferate, and we'll wake up a decade from now, and tech will be in every SHRM discussion. And I remember when I went through certification 100 years ago, there was no tech in there. Like the body of the BOK, there was no explicit technology. It was woven into everything else. But I think we'll see that grow, both the community grow, as well as the conference and all of those things. I think this is going to hit all of the chapters and all the state conferences and national, and it's just going to hit everything. But I love the fact that SHRM isn't just doing a tech conference. This is this is one spoke of a much larger wheel, which I think is going to be super helpful to practitioner and basically transformational. And they've needed it, and y'all are going to provide it. So I think it's great.
Thank you so much. Well, hey guys, we could probably like turn this into like a full day event. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. We actually went a little bit over of what we typically do here, but the conversation was so great. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And to the audience out there, we hope all of you enjoyed it. And once again, if you're an HR professional, you need to start thinking about yourself as the person to be leading workplace innovation at your organization. Once again, we hope that you'll join us at SHRM Tech in March in San Francisco. Thank you for tuning in. And once again, we hope that you'll join us for the next one. Visit us at shrmlabs.com to stay up to date. See you next time. Guys, thank you so much. Everyone else out there, thank you for joining us. See you guys.
See ya.